Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Endeavour, watching the massive Council Station Omega-7 grow larger in the view screen. The station looked like a metal city floating in space with ships from dozens of different alien species docked at its many ports. Jake had made this trip many times over the past 5 years, but today felt different somehow. The communication officer turned to face him with worry in her eyes. "Captain, we have an urgent message from Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez." Jake nodded and took the encrypted data pad. As he read the message, his face grew dark with anger. The Galactic Peace Council had just passed Resolution 2847 in an emergency session. The resolution stripped humanity of all mining rights to the Kepler star systems. Those systems contained the rare minerals that Earth needed to feed its growing population and build new colonies. What made it worse was that Ambassador Rodriguez had been deliberately kept out of the emergency session. For 3,000 years, the Council had governed the galaxy through careful rules and representation. Every species got a voice in decisions that affected them. Every species except humanity. It seemed Jake walked to his ready room and opened a secure channel to Earth Command. Admiral Kate Sullivan appeared on the screen, looking tired. She had been fighting political battles on Earth while Jake handled diplomatic missions in Council space. "I assume you got the news about Resolution 2847, Admiral Sullivan said without. "Greeting." "Yes, ma'am. The ambassador is requesting immediate support. The Council is claiming we pose a threat to galactic stability." Admiral Sullivan rubbed her temples. "Jake, we both know this isn't about stability. Our intelligence suggests the Vorthak have been pressuring smaller species to vote against us. They want the Kepler systems for themselves. The Vorthak were the dominant species in the Council. Their representative speaker Zethkar had made it clear from the beginning that he saw humanity as newcomers who needed to know their place. 50 years in the Council was nothing compared to the thousands of years other species had been members. Jake returned to the bridge just as another urgent message arrived. This one made his blood run cold. Council security forces led by the militaristic Kronari had stormed the human embassy quarters. Ambassador Rodriguez was under arrest for what they called inciting rebellion against Council authority. The bridge crew watched in silence as Jake read the message aloud. These were career military officers who had served in dangerous situations across the galaxy. They had seen combat and political crisis before, but this felt like betrayal on a scale none of them had experienced. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster spoke first. "Sir, what are our orders?" Jake looked at the tactical display showing Council ships moving into position around the station. The Endeavour was a diplomatic vessel with light weapons and shields. Against the Council fleet, they would last maybe 10 minutes in a direct fight. "We monitor the situation and report back to Admiral Sullivan," Jake said. "But we stay ready to leave quickly if needed." Dr. Ryan Clark entered the bridge carrying a data tablet. The xenobiologist had been working with Council scientists for years studying alien life forms. His research had led to medical breakthroughs that saved millions of lives across multiple species. "Captain, I need to speak with you privately," Dr. Clark said with urgency in his voice. In the ready room, Dr. Clark activated a privacy screen and handed Jake the tablet. "I discovered something terrible in the Council medical databases. My Vorthak colleagues have been using my research to develop biological weapons." Jake stared at the data. The weapons were designed specifically to target human physiology. The Council hadn't just been planning to take the Kepler systems. They had been preparing to eliminate humanity entirely. "How long have they been working on this?" Jake asked. "At least 2 years based on these files. Maybe longer." "Captain, they never intended for us to be equals in the Council. We were always meant to be controlled or destroyed." Another message arrived from the station. The Council was now demanding that humanity surrender their most advanced warships and submit to protective custody for all human colonies. The message used diplomatic language, but the meaning was clear. Submit completely or face the consequences. Jake looked out at the council station, where his friend and colleague Ambassador Rodriguez was being held prisoner. She had spent 5 years building relationships with alien diplomats. She had believed, like all of them, that peace and cooperation were possible. Now she was paying the price for that faith. Engineer Sam Bennett joined them in the ready room. He had been monitoring council communications using equipment that technically violated several treaties. In normal times, Jake would have stopped him. These were not normal times. Captain, the council military is mobilizing, Sam reported. They're calling up reserve fleets from 12 different species. This isn't just about the Kepler systems anymore. Jake made a decision that would change everything for humanity. He activated the ship's emergency beacon, sending a coded message to every human vessel in council space. The message was simple, but its meaning was clear to anyone who received it. The Galactic Peace Council had pushed too hard. They had shown their true nature. Peace was never really an option, because the Council had never seen humanity as equals. They saw humans as a threat to be contained or eliminated. Jake Morrison had spent his career believing in diplomatic solutions and peaceful cooperation. As he watched Council warships take positions around human settlements, he realized that sometimes the only way to find real peace was to walk away from those who would never offer it. The time for compromise was over. Admiral Kate Sullivan received Jake Morrison's encrypted message while her fleet patrolled the edge of Council space. The communication was brief, but its implications were enormous. Humanity had to leave Council territory before they became prisoners. In their own star systems, Kate had commanded the human fleet for 8 years. She had fought pirates and negotiated trade disputes. She had always believed that patient diplomacy would eventually earn humanity respect among the galactic community. Jake's message shattered that belief completely. The fleet consisted of 47 ships, ranging from massive colony transports to fast attack vessels. They were spread across 6 star systems, protecting human settlements and trade routes. Getting them all to safety would require perfect coordination and more luck than Kate wanted to rely on. Dr. Ryan Clark arrived at the flagship UHS Constitution 12 hours after Jake's message. His transport ship had pushed its engines beyond safe limits to reach the fleet quickly. When Kate saw his face, she knew the situation was even worse then. Jake had reported, "Admiral, the Council has been planning our extinction for years," Dr. Clark said as he handed her a data storage device. "They used my research to develop biological weapons specifically designed to kill humans." Kate plugged the device into her command console and read through the files. The biological weapons were just part of a larger plan. The Council had been studying human military tactics and technology weaknesses. They had prepared countermeasures for every type of ship in the human fleet. "How long do we have before they move against the colonies?" Kate asked. "Based on their mobilization patterns, maybe 2 weeks," Dr. Clark replied. "The Council is calling. This a police action to maintain galactic stability. They expect minimal resistance from a species they consider primitive." Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster entered the briefing room carrying tactical reports from across human space. Amy had served as Kate's chief tactical officer for 3 years. She was known for her ability to see solutions that others missed. "Admiral, I've been analyzing our evacuation options," Amy said. 42 human colonies scattered across Council space with a total population of 8 million people. Our transport capacity can handle maybe half that number in a single trip. Kate studied the star charts showing human settlements. Most colonies had been established in systems the Council considered worthless. Humans had turned barren worlds into thriving communities through hard work and innovation. Now they would have to abandon everything they had built. "We'll do it in phases," Kate decided. "Military families and essential personnel first, then civilian volunteers. Anyone who wants to stay and take their chances with the Council can make that choice." Engineer Sam Bennett joined the meeting by holographic projection from his position aboard the UHS Defiance. Sam had been working around the clock to prepare human technology for evacuation. Nothing could be left behind that might help the Council track fleeing human ships. "Admiral, we're implementing scorched earth protocols," Sam reported. "All research, Facilities, mining equipment, and defensive installations will be destroyed before we leave. The Council won't gain anything useful from our retreat. The next few days became a whirlwind of activity as the human fleet split into smaller task forces. Each group had responsibility for evacuating specific colonies while avoiding Council patrol routes. The operation required abandoning standard fleet formations and communication protocols. Jake Morrison coordinated the civilian evacuation from his position near Council Station Omega-7. His ship, the UHS Endeavor, had become a beacon for refugees fleeing Council persecution. Human families arrived with nothing but the clothes they wore and hope for a new beginning. The evacuation revealed something unexpected about humanity's time in Council space. Other species had been watching human innovation and determination with growing interest. The peaceful Zenthari sent secret envoys expressing concern about Council tyranny. Captain Ben Harris commanded the scout ship UHS Explorer as it mapped safe routes beyond Council borders. Ben had spent years charting unexplored regions of the galaxy. His knowledge of hidden star clusters and abandoned systems would be crucial for humanity's survival. "Admiral, I found something interesting beyond the galactic rim," Ben reported, during a secure communication. "A star cluster rich in resources and completely outside Council influence. It's dangerous to reach because of radiation fields, but our ships can handle it." The cluster Ben described became humanity's destination. They called it the Freedom Sector, a name that reflected their determination to build something better than what the Council offered. As human ships began their coordinated withdrawal, other species took notice. The industrial Mechani quietly expressed sympathy for humanity's situation. Even some Chronari military officers seemed uncomfortable with orders to suppress civilian populations. Dr. Clark established mobile research labs aboard the evacuation fleet. Without Council restrictions on technology sharing, he began combining human innovations with designs borrowed from other species. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Kate watched the evacuation progress from her command center aboard the Constitution. Families who had lived on human colonies for generations were leaving everything behind. Children who had been born in Council space would grow up as refugees beyond the galactic rim. The hardest part was knowing they might never return. The Council controlled the most habitable systems in the galaxy. Human refugees would have to terraform hostile worlds or live aboard generation ships. It would be a hard life, but it would be free. Jake Morrison sent regular updates on Council military movements. Speaker Zethkar was mobilizing forces for what he expected would be a quick campaign to round up fleeing humans. The Council leadership seemed to believe that humans would beg for readmission once they faced the harsh reality of life outside civilized space. Engineer Sam Bennett proved them wrong by developing new shield technologies that allowed human ships to travel through dangerous radiation zones. The same conditions that made the Freedom Sector uninhabitable for most species became humanity's protection against pursuit. Amy Foster coordinated the military escort for civilian transports. Her tactical innovations kept the evacuation fleet ahead of Council pursuit forces. She developed new formation patterns that confused Council sensors and made human ships appear to be natural phenomena. The evacuation took 6 months to complete. When the last human transport cleared Council space, Kate Sullivan felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Humanity had successfully escaped the Council's trap, but at the cost of everything they had built over 50 years. As the fleet approached the Freedom Sector, Kate made a promise to herself and to the 8 million humans who had trusted her with their lives. They would build something better than what they had left behind. The Council had pushed too hard, and now they would learn what humanity could accomplish when free from artificial constraints. The exodus was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Captain Ben Harris guided his scout ship through the radiation storms that protected the Freedom Sector from unwanted visitors. 6 months had passed since humanity fled Council space, and now they needed to transform this dangerous region into a new home. The star cluster contained 12 systems with over 40 planets. Most were hostile worlds covered in ice or burning under radiation from unstable stars. But 3 systems showed promise for human colonization. With some terraforming work, Ben transmitted his survey data to the fleet command ship, where Admiral Kate Sullivan studied the tactical situation. The Freedom Sector was like a natural fortress, protected by radiation barriers that would destroy most Council ships. Human vessels could navigate the hazards using new shield technology developed during the Exodus Colony Administrator Helen Stone supervised the establishment of New Terra on the most habitable planet they had found. Helen had managed colonial development for 15 years, but never under conditions like these. Every piece of equipment had to be transported through radiation storms, and there were no backup supplies available. The first settlement took shape quickly as human refugees, worked with desperate efficiency. They had left comfortable homes in Council space to live in prefabricated shelters on a world where the sky glowed with aurora from constant radiation bombardment. Nobody complained because they were finally free. Dr. Ryan Clark established research facilities that would have been impossible under Council oversight. Without ethics committees controlled by species that considered humans inferior, his teams made breakthrough discoveries in genetics and terraforming. The work proceeded at a pace that amazed even the researchers themselves. Jake Morrison now held the rank of Fleet Intelligence Coordinator monitoring Council space through hidden sensor stations. His network of automated probes detected increasing military activity as the Council prepared for what they believed would be humanity's inevitable surrender. Engineer Sam Bennett revolutionized human technology by combining innovations from multiple species without worrying about Council patent restrictions. His teams created ships that were faster and more efficient than anything in Council space. The new designs used materials found in abundance throughout the Freedom Sector. Admiral Sullivan established the Human Defense Initiative based on mobility and unpredictability rather than the siege warfare favored by Council militaries. Her fleet became impossible to track as ships used the radiation storms for cover and struck from unexpected directions. Meanwhile, secret communications from Council space revealed growing problems. The Zenthari faced economic collapse without human trade partners. Their peaceful nature had made them dependent on human agricultural products and manufacturing innovations. The mining-focused, Rokani discovered that human-designed extraction equipment was far superior to anything approved by Council regulations. Without access to human technology, their mining operations became inefficient and dangerous. Jake's intelligence network also detected signs of political unrest in Council space. Several smaller species had begun questioning whether the Council truly served their interests or just maintained Vorthak dominance over the galaxy captain. Harris led exploration missions deeper into the Freedom Sector, mapping resources and establishing supply depots. His teams discovered asteroid belts rich in rare metals and gas giants perfect for fuel extraction. The cluster contained everything humanity needed to build an independent civilization. Helen Stone coordinated the construction of manufacturing facilities using modular designs that could be quickly relocated if Council forces somehow penetrated. The radiation barriers. The factories produced everything from clothing to starship components using raw materials extracted from hostile alien worlds. Dr. Clark's medical research teams developed treatments for radiation exposure that allowed humans to work safely in environments that would kill most other species. The treatments became humanity's first major advantage over their former Council allies. The research also led to life extension therapies that could add decades to human lifespan. Without Council restrictions on genetic modification, the medical advances proceeded rapidly. Humans began to evolve beyond what they had been in Council space. Sam Bennett's engineering teams created new types of starships designed specifically for the harsh conditions of the Freedom Sector. The vessels used adaptive hull plating that could reconfigure based on radiation levels and gravitational anomalies. Admiral Sullivan tested the new ships in mock battles against simulated Council fleets. The results exceeded her expectations, as human vessels proved capable of tactics that Council military doctrine could not counter. Speed and adaptability trumped size and firepower. Jake Morrison established communication protocols with sympathetic species still trapped in Council space. The messages had to be carefully encrypted to avoid detection, but they provided valuable intelligence about Council military preparations and political developments. The Zenthari secretly requested human assistance in developing alternative food production methods. Their homeworld was becoming unable to support their population without imports that the Council now controlled. Jake arranged for discreet technology transfers that helped prevent starvation. 2 years after arriving in the Freedom Sector, humanity had transformed from refugees into a thriving independent civilization. New Terra had grown from a collection of shelters into a proper city with universities and cultural centers. Helen Stone reported that the terraforming projects were ahead of schedule. The combination of human determination and unrestricted scientific research had produced results that amazed even the most optimistic planners. Captain Harris discovered evidence of ancient civilizations that had once lived in the Freedom Sector. The archaeological sites contained technology far advanced beyond anything the Council possessed. It seemed that other species had once sought refuge in this same region. Dr. Clark's teams began studying the ancient ruins' learning technologies that had been lost for millennia. The discoveries suggested that the Council's dominance over the galaxy was not as permanent as they claimed. Other civilizations had risen and fallen before Admiral Sullivan received reports that Council military forces were finally mobilizing for an assault on the Freedom Sector. Speaker Zeth Carr had convinced the other Council species that humanity posed an existential threat to galactic order. The intelligence indicated that 12 different species would contribute ships to the largest military mobilization in Council history. The assault force would include over 300 vessels commanded by the most experienced officers in Council space. Jake Morrison analyzed the Council battle plans and found them predictably conventional. The enemy expected to find scattered refugees hiding in primitive settlements. Instead, they would encounter a fully militarized human civilization that had spent 2 years preparing for exactly this scenario. Engineer Sam Bennett made final preparations to the defense systems protecting human settlements. The new weapons used principles discovered in the ancient ruins combined with human innovation and desperation. As the Council fleet approached the radiation barriers surrounding the Freedom Sector, Admiral Sullivan prepared her forces for the battle that would determine humanity's future. They had walked away from the Council's false peace and built something better. Now they would have to fight to keep it. Speaker Zeth Carr stood on the command bridge of the Council flagship, watching the radiation storms that surrounded the Freedom Sector. The massive fleet behind him represented 12 different species, united in their determination to crush human rebellion once and for all. The Vorthak leader had spent 2 years convincing other Council species that humanity posed an existential threat to galactic order. Now 327 warships from across Council space prepared to enter the radiation barriers and destroy the human settlements. Beyond, Admiral Kate Sullivan received the final intelligence report from Jake Morrison's sensor network as the Council fleet approached. The enemy had brought overwhelming firepower, but their ships were designed for conventional space warfare, not the harsh conditions of the Freedom Sector. Captain Ben Harris led the first human response, flying his upgraded scout ship through radiation storms that would cripple most Council vessels. His mission was to observe enemy formations and relay tactical data to Admiral Sullivan's command center on New Terra. The Council fleet entered the radiation barriers in tight formation, following navigation protocols that had worked in normal space for thousands of years. Within hours, their communications began failing as cosmic interference disrupted their coordination systems. Engineer Sam Bennett monitored the enemy advance from his position aboard the human command ship UHS Liberty. The new vessel incorporated technology from the ancient ruins combined with innovations developed during humanity's exile. Its weapons and defenses far exceeded anything the Council had faced before. Admiral Sullivan activated the defense plan that her forces had rehearsed for months. Human ships scattered through the radiation storms using the hostile environment as cover while Council forces struggled to maintain formation in conditions their vessels were never designed to handle. The Battle of Freedom's Edge began when Council scouts encountered the first human patrol ships near the outer rim of the sector. The Chronari commanders expected easy victories against primitive refugee vessels. Instead, they found themselves outmaneuvered by ships that moved through radiation fields like fish through water. Captain Harris led stealth strikes against Council supply lines using tactics that violated every principle of conventional space warfare. His small, fast ships appeared from radiation storms, struck critical targets, and vanished before enemy weapons could acquire them. The Council fleet tried to maintain their standard siege formation, but the radiation interference made coordination impossible. Ship captains lost contact with Fleet Command and began making independent decisions that destroyed their tactical unity. Jake Morrison coordinated electronic warfare operations from a hidden command post on New Terra. His teams used advanced jamming technology to disrupt Council communications while maintaining perfect contact between human forces through quantum-encrypted channels. Dr. Ryan Clark deployed the biological countermeasures he had developed using Council research data stolen during the evacuation. The weapons disabled Council life support systems without causing permanent harm, demonstrating that humanity could have destroyed their enemies but chose restraint. The mercy shown by human forces confused Council commanders who expected savage resistance from the species they considered barbaric. Instead of the brutal warfare they had prepared for, they faced tactical brilliance combined with unexpected compassion. Engineer Sam Bennett's weapon systems proved devastatingly effective against Council ship designs, the ancient technology discovered in the Freedom sector had given humanity access to energy manipulation techniques that made Council shields and armor obsolete. Within 6 hours of entering the radiation barriers, the mighty Council fleet was in complete disarray. Ships designed for open space combat found themselves helpless in an environment where human vessels moved with perfect confidence. Speaker Zethkar watched his grand strategy collapse as reports flooded in from across the battlefield. The humans were not hiding in primitive settlements waiting for rescue. They had become something new and dangerous during their exile from Council. Space Admiral Sullivan ordered her forces to pursue the retreating Council ships, only far enough to ensure they would not return soon. Human vessels escorted damaged Council ships to safe areas beyond the radiation barriers before withdrawing to defend their territory. The pursuit demonstrated both human military superiority and their continued commitment to minimizing casualties. Council officers who had expected brutal treatment instead received medical aid and safe passage back to their own space. Captain Harris transmitted Admiral Sullivan's message across galactic communication networks, despite Council attempts at censorship. The broadcast was simple, but its implications echoed throughout civilized space. Humanity wanted no part of the Council's version of peace, but they would defend their freedom at any cost. The species that had once begged for representation in Council chambers had become a military force capable of humbling the galaxy's greatest powers. The humiliating defeat sent shockwaves through Council space as member species realized that their supposedly invincible military had been crushed by refugees. Using improvised tactics and determination, Jake Morrison's intelligence network detected immediate political fallout as Council member species began questioning the leadership that had led them into such a disastrous conflict. The Zenthari openly praised human restraint and victory while quietly opening diplomatic channels through neutral intermediaries. Even some Chronari military units expressed private admiration for human tactical innovations. Dr. Clark's humanitarian teams offered medical assistance to Council casualties, demonstrating that human science had advanced far beyond what their former Allies had achieved under Council restrictions. Engineer Sam Bennett began analyzing captured Council technology, finding it inferior to human innovations in almost every category. The species that had considered themselves superior had been surpassed by the refugees they had tried to destroy. Admiral Sullivan stood in the command center on New Terra, watching Council ships limp back toward their own territory. 2 years earlier, humanity had fled Council space as defeated refugees. Now they had proven themselves capable of defending their independence against overwhelming odds. The victory was complete, but Admiral Sullivan knew it was only the beginning. The Council would not accept this humiliation without attempting revenge. More importantly, the battle had demonstrated to oppressed species throughout the galaxy that the Council could be defeated. Captain Harris reported that his sensor network was detecting increased activity in Council border regions. Several species were demanding representation in emergency sessions, while others began withdrawing their forces from Council command structure. The Battle of Freedom's Edge had lasted less than 12 hours, but its consequences would reshape the political structure of the entire galaxy. Humanity had not just won a military victory, they had shattered the myth of Council invincibility. Speaker Zethkar's grand plan to eliminate the human threat had instead proven that refugees with determination and freedom could accomplish what established powers thought impossible. The Council had made their greatest mistake by pushing too hard against a species that refused to surrender their dignity. News of the Council's defeat spread through galactic communication networks faster than official censors could suppress it. Species that had endured centuries of Council oppression suddenly saw proof that resistance was possible and the supposedly invincible military could be beaten. The Zenthari were first to break openly from Council authority, declaring their star systems independent and requesting human protection. Their peaceful nature had made them vulnerable to Council economic pressure, but now they saw an alternative to submission. Captain Jake Morrison led the diplomatic team that negotiated humanity's first formal alliance since leaving Council space. The agreements were carefully structured to respect Zenthari autonomy. While providing mutual defense against Council retaliation, Jake had learned hard lessons about galactic politics during his years serving in Council space. This time, the treaties included clear escape clauses and guarantees that neither species would dominate the other. The partnership was between equals, not masters and subjects. Admiral Kate Sullivan faced difficult decisions as more species requested human assistance in breaking from Council control. The mining collective, known as the Rakani, abandoned their traditional territories, bringing their expertise to help develop the Freedom Sector's rich asteroid fields. Engineer Sam Bennett freely shared human technological innovations with new allies, proving that cooperation could achieve more than the Council's restrictive patent system. The combination of human creativity with Rakani mining knowledge and Zenthari agricultural science produced remarkable results. Dr. Ryan Clark established the Free Galaxy Research Consortium, bringing together scientists from multiple species to pursue projects banned by Council ethics committees. Research into life extension terraforming and quantum communication proceeded at unprecedented speed without bureaucratic interference. The industrial mechani staged coordinated work stoppages that crippled manufacturing across dozens of Council systems. Their leaders sent secret messages requesting human technical assistance in developing independent production capabilities. Even some Chronari military units began questioning orders to suppress civilian populations as reports of human mercy during the Battle of Freedom's Edge contradicted official propaganda about human savagery. Council space began fragmenting as member species demanded representation and rights that the Vorthak-dominated leadership refused to grant. The economic disruption caused by fleeing allies created shortages of essential goods throughout Council territory. Captain Ben Harris expanded his intelligence network to monitor the growing rebellion across the galaxy. His reports showed that discontent had been building for decades, but the Council's defeat at Freedom's Edge had finally given oppressed species hope for change. Admiral Sullivan watched refugee ships arrive daily at human settlements, carrying families fleeing Council. Military crackdowns The stories they brought of atrocities committed to maintain order convinced her that isolation was no longer an option. The decision to actively support Galactic Rebellion came when Council forces attempted to destroy a Zenthari agricultural world as punishment for their alliance with humanity. The attack would have caused mass starvation across multiple systems. Jake Morrison's diplomatic efforts had created a communication network that allowed rapid coordination between rebel species. When the Council assault began, human ships were already moving to intercept despite being outnumbered 3-1. The intervention at Zenthari Prime marked humanity's full commitment to overthrowing the Council system. Admiral Sullivan's fleet arrived just in time to prevent genocide, but the action meant there could be no peaceful coexistence with the old order. Dr. Clark's humanitarian teams provided aid to civilian populations caught in the expanding conflict. Their mobile medical facilities saved thousands of lives while demonstrating human commitment to protecting innocents regardless of species. Engineer Sam Bennett's technological revolution reached new heights as human and allied scientists achieved faster-than-light communication, allowing real-time coordination across galactic distances. The Council's advantage of centralized command evaporated when their enemies could coordinate as effectively. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Human-led coalitions used tactics of liberation rather than conquest, freeing systems and encouraging self-governance instead of imposing new hierarchies. Captain Harris reported that even species still loyal to the Council were beginning to demand reforms. The Vorthak leadership faced pressure from their own people, as casualties mounted in what was supposed to have been a simple police action. Jake Morrison became the first human ambassador to liberated systems, helping establish what would become the Galactic Federation. The new organization was based on voluntary association and mutual benefit rather than domination by the strongest species. The Council's response to the growing rebellion revealed their true nature as they implemented increasingly harsh measures to maintain control. Summary executions and orbital bombardments of civilian targets turned former allies into enemies. Admiral Sullivan coordinated resistance efforts while maintaining strict rules of engagement that prohibited targeting civilian populations. The contrast between human restraint and Council brutality won hearts and minds across the galaxy. Dr. Clark's research teams developed new technologies that gave rebel forces significant advantages over Council military doctrine. Medical advances allowed rapid treatment of battlefield injuries while quantum communication networks coordinated. Complex operations engineer Sam Bennett created a standardized technology sharing system that allowed different species to integrate their innovations quickly. The rapid advancement of rebel capabilities surprised Council strategists who had expected primitive resistance. The tide of war turned decisively when major Chronari military units defected, bringing with them detailed intelligence about Council defensive systems. The proud warrior species had finally seen enough atrocities committed in their name. Captain Harris's intelligence network detected preparations for Speaker Zethkar's final solution. The Vorthak leader planned to eliminate all rebel species as an example to others who might consider challenging Council authority. The intercepted communications revealed orbital weapons positioned to sterilize entire worlds. The Council was preparing to commit genocide on a scale never before seen in galactic history. Rather than accept the loss of their absolute power, Admiral Sullivan realized that the coming battle would determine whether the galaxy would be ruled by fear or governed by cooperation. The species that had walked away from the Council's false peace now held the future of galactic civilization in their hands. Jake Morrison prepared diplomatic initiatives for the post-war galaxy, while military forces positioned themselves for the final confrontation. The new Federation would need to prove it could govern more effectively than the system it was replacing. The ripple effect that began with humanity's exodus from Council space was about to reach its conclusion. The Second Galactic War reached its climax when Council forces moved to destroy the Zenthari homeworld as punishment for their alliance with humanity. Admiral Kate Sullivan's fleet jumped into the system just as orbital bombardment platforms prepared to fire on civilian population centers. The battle for Zenthari Prime became the defining moment of the conflict as human ships positioned themselves between Council weapons and innocent civilians. Admiral Sullivan broadcast a simple message to the attacking fleet, warning them that humanity would not allow genocide to proceed. Speaker Zethkar commanded the Council assault force, personally believing that a decisive show of force would end the rebellion once and for all. Instead, he found himself facing an enemy that had evolved far beyond what the Council remembered from their previous encounters. Captain Jake Morrison coordinated the evacuation of civilian populations, while human warships engaged Council forces in brutal close-quarters combat. The fighting was desperate, as both sides understood that this battle would determine the future of galactic civilization. Engineer Sam Bennett's technological innovations proved decisive, as human weapons systems overwhelmed Council defenses that had seemed impregnable just years before. The ancient technology discovered in the Freedom Sector, combined with human ingenuity, created capabilities that no Council strategist had anticipated. Dr. Ryan Clark's humanitarian teams worked under fire to establish field hospitals and evacuation centers. The sight of human medics treating wounded Council soldiers alongside civilian casualties demonstrated the principles that would guide the new galactic order. The war that followed spread across hundreds of star systems as oppressed species throughout. The galaxy rose up against their Council oppressors. Human-led coalitions fought not to conquer territory, but to liberate populations and establish self-governing systems. Captain Ben Harris commanded reconnaissance missions that identified Council strongholds and civilian areas, allowing rebel forces to minimize casualties while maximizing strategic impact. The precision of human intelligence gathering frustrated Council attempts to use civilian shields. Jake Morrison's diplomatic efforts proved as important as military victories in building the coalition that would eventually replace the Council. His negotiations with dozens of species created the framework for what would become the Galactic Federation. The new organization was built on principles that the Council had abandoned long ago. Every species would have equal representation, regardless of military power or economic influence. Decisions would be made by consensus, rather than domination by the strongest members. Admiral Sullivan's forces developed tactics that allowed rapid liberation of Council-held systems with minimal destruction of infrastructure. The goal was to capture resources intact so they could be used to rebuild galactic civilization under more just principles. Dr. Clark's research teams worked with liberated populations to develop technologies that would prevent any single species from dominating others. Medical advances were shared freely, while weapons research focused on defensive rather than offensive capabilities. Engineer Bennett created the technological foundation for the new Federation by establishing standardized systems that allowed different species to communicate and cooperate effectively. The innovations eliminated the technical barriers that had maintained Council control. The final battle took place at Council Station Omega 7, where humanity's journey had begun years earlier. Speaker Zethkar made his last stand in the same chambers. Where he had once humiliated human diplomats and stripped away their rights, Admiral Sullivan led the assault on the station, personally accompanied by representatives from every species that had joined the rebellion. The symbolic importance of the battle was as significant as its strategic value. Captain Harris's teams secured the station's databases containing detailed records of Council crimes against member species. The evidence would be used to establish truth and reconciliation processes rather than seeking revenge against former oppressors. Jake Morrison offered Speaker Zethkar the same choice that the Council had once denied humanity. The Vorthak leader could accept exile to a remote system or integrate into the new Federation under the same laws that applied to every other species. The Vorthak leader's surrender marked the end of 3,000 years of Council rule, but Admiral Sullivan understood that winning the war was easier than building lasting peace. The new Federation would have to prove it could govern more effectively than the system it replaced. Dr. Clark's medical teams treated Speaker Zethkar's injuries while he awaited trial for war crimes. The decision to provide medical care to their former enemy, demonstrated the principles of justice and mercy that would guide the new galactic order. Engineer Bennett led teams in dismantling the Council's oppressive surveillance systems while preserving infrastructure needed for legitimate governance. The technical challenge of rebuilding galactic civilization without repeating past mistakes required careful planning. 5 years after walking away from the Council's false peace, humanity stood at the center of a new galactic civilization. The Freedom Sector had become a beacon of learning and innovation, welcoming refugees and researchers from across the galaxy. Captain Morrison now held the rank of Admiral and served as humanity's representative to the Galactic Federation. He stood on the observation deck of Liberty Station, watching ships from dozens of species dock peacefully together. The station had once been Council Station Omega-7, where human diplomats were humiliated and arrested. Now it served as the Federation, capital where every species had an equal voice in shaping galactic policy. Admiral Sullivan reviewed reports from across the galaxy showing the progress of reconstruction efforts. Former Council systems were transitioning to self-governance while maintaining cooperation through the Federation framework. Dr. Clark's research consortium had made breakthrough discoveries that improved life for billions of beings across the galaxy. Medical advances developed in human laboratories now prevented diseases that had plagued multiple species for millennia. Engineer Bennett's technological sharing programs had eliminated the scarcity that the Council had used to maintain control. Advanced manufacturing techniques allowed even the smallest colonies to produce everything needed for prosperous societies. The new galactic order faced challenges as different species learned to cooperate as equals rather than following orders from dominant powers, but the problems were solved through negotiation and compromise rather than force and intimidation. Captain Harris continued exploring uncharted regions of the galaxy, discovering new worlds and new species that could benefit from Federation membership. Each new contact was approached with respect and offers of mutual cooperation. The principles that guided the Federation had emerged from humanity's experience as refugees forced to build something better than what they had left behind. The species that had been pushed too hard by the Council had created a civilization based on freedom and justice. Admiral Morrison reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The Council's betrayal had seemed like a disaster when human diplomats were arrested and colonies were threatened. Instead, it had become the catalyst for revolutionary change. The galaxy was no longer ruled by fear and hierarchy, but governed by cooperation and mutual respect. Humanity had not sought to become galactic leaders, but their example of principled resistance had inspired others to demand better from their governments. The war crimes trials of former Council leaders proceeded, with careful attention to justice rather than revenge. Even Speaker Zethkar received fair treatment and legal representation as the Federation demonstrated its commitment to the rule of law. The new galactic civilization faced an uncertain future, but it was built on foundations of freedom and cooperation. That would endure. The Council had pushed too hard against a species that refused to accept injustice, and in doing so, had created the catalyst for their own transformation.